Thank you, Pastor John, and thank you, Joanna, for organising this evening's event. Earlier in the week, some of you may or may not know that in addition to the junior cycle curriculum, the state published proposals for a new senior cycle curriculum to be taught to people from the ages of about 15 to 18 for leaving cert, essentially, on SPHE. On page 14 of that, Strand 2 says that the objective of that curriculum, what it's supposed to do, is to, quote, combat harmful attitudes around gender. Now, it doesn't tell us what harmful attitudes around gender are, but we all sat through Grace's excellent presentation a few moments ago, so do we think we have an idea what they mean when they say harmful attitudes towards gender? What they mean by a harmful attitude towards gender is the idea that I cannot tomorrow declare myself a woman and be just as much a woman as that lady in the front row. That's the law at the moment. And when the government says they want to combat harmful attitudes around gender, what they're saying is they want to convince teenagers that anyone who says a man cannot become a woman is wrong and is saying something harmful. That is the objective of the new sex education curriculum. Now, a lot of people in this room will say, I don't want my kids taught that nonsense, and you're right. But think a little bit about what the objective beyond the just teaching is. Think about what the objective is if you substantially replace the attitudes over time in the country by bringing through generations of kids who suddenly believe that men can become women like that with a snap of the fingers and vice versa. The objective, my friends, is to make all of us in this room functionally extinct. To wipe out our attitudes. The objective of the government here, or not the government. Patter is too generous to the government. Patter is doing wonderful things. I'm delighted to hear the support he's getting in this room, but he's too generous to the government in saying that this is their idea. I study these people, we report on them every day, bunch of clowns. They do not have ideas. We saw in Grace's presentation from whence these ideas are coming. The Transgender Equality Network of Ireland belong to, state-funded, you're all paying for them, by the way. You don't pay my wages, you pay theirs. You don't pay Grace's wages, you pay theirs. The government hands over money to these activists. The activists tell the government what to do, and if you criticize them, eventually it's going to be hate speech. This is about more than sex education. This is about, fundamentally, the essence of the problem that we have. Because we are told constantly, turn on the news, turn on a television program, and you will hear some worthy liberal person bleating about diversity. So important that we live in a compassionate and diverse society where all strands are recognized and included. You've all heard it. What they want to do in actuality is to eradicate diversity. That is the objective. It is to eradicate diversity. That is the reason why this is all connected to the hate speech bill, which is to take what kids are being taught in school and turn it into a crime to deny that in wider society. A crime to say, as Enoch Burke did, you are a boy. A crime. Not just something that you can lose your job for, as he did, but something that you can go to prison for. It is the objective of, for example, the safe access zones legislation. Ever heard anything as nonsensical in your life? A safe access zone. What does that mean? It means people can't protest in that area, can't tell you that you are wrong or that what you are doing in their view is immoral. What kind of a free society do we live in where somebody cannot say, hold on a second, I think what you're doing is wrong and you should stop? That is the essence of a free society. The essence of it. And it all comes back to something else, by the way. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The utter, unending, terrifying, deep, abiding suspicion and fear these people have of any kind of faith-based values. That is what they're terrified of. Because if you listen to the assumptions that are shared across my very worthy colleagues in the rest of the media, the way they talk about religion, the way they cover, I mean, a couple of years ago, there was the incident on RTE News at Christmas where they made a joke about how God had raped the Virgin Mary. Very funny. The attitudes towards Christianity being a kind of backward faith. The idea that Ireland has evolved from a dark Roman Catholic religious place into a new enlightened era of freedom where we have, and you'll have heard this phrase, cast off the shackles of our past. They are talking about you. They're talking about me. They're talking about anybody who walks into a house of worship, be it Jewish, Christian, Muslim, whatever, on a Sunday and professes a faith in an almighty God, because to them that is a threat. Because to them, the new country in which we live is one which is post-Christian, but in fact, more than that, post-religious. And so what do they do? And this is where the media comes in, and this is why we founded Gript. I'm checking my time. We founded Gript because the thing that they have going for them, in this debate about sex education and in all the other things we've touched on here tonight, is the feeling of othering. There are many of you in this room tonight, I suspect, I might be wrong, who go to workplaces or to social clubs or to GA clubs or to soccer clubs, wherever it is you go, where you socialize with other people. And you're a bit afraid to air your opinions because they're unpopular in the media. And you have this assumption worked into yourself that you are, in fact, a minority. That you are what the media have told you that you are, that you're one of those oddball Christians. And I'm sorry, I don't mean that to offend you in any way, but that is the perception that is tossed out there by the media. And even if you are, like me, not particularly religious, even if you hold particular views, oh, well, you're probably in the minority. Best keep your mouth shut. Don't rock the boat. You know, go home and tell your wife that actually, you know, you wouldn't believe the nonsense today. That's the kind of way a lot of people in this country live. They keep quiet and they don't know that the person on the other side of the room thinks the exact same thing as they do on a particular topic. And this is carefully created. This is what happens when you have a media that is entirely homogenous. And that is why we founded Gript. I don't want to brag, but we founded it from nothing. Absolutely nothing. And we have grown it over the last couple of years, not by doing what I'm doing tonight, giving like a kind of firebrandish kind of speech, but simply by doing the job that the media should do, which is ask hard questions in a fair way. What we do, what we are trying to do, and I'm talking about ourselves for a purpose here, because there's a theme here, which is we are trying to challenge the notion that the people in this room are a minority in thinking that what Grace put up on the screen tonight is bull. And I'm not going to use the rest of that word, but the idea that we're in a minority has to be challenged because we are not in a minority. And there are people... There are people working for RTE and the Irish Times and the Irish Independent who know full well that you're not in a minority, but who will never ask these questions because to do them would put them in a minority, would put them in a minority in their little social group. They couldn't go back to the Irish Times office and go, well, what did you ask Simon Harris about today? Well, I asked him actually whether it was appropriate to teach kids about transgenders. Couldn't go to the pub that night. They'd be shunned. That is the reality. I mean, there is that atmosphere of tyranny in other media organizations where this kind of attitude of fear reigns. And one of the reasons that we founded Gript, as I said, was to challenge that and be the voice who puts their hand up and go, actually, you know what, this is... I won't use the word. That's what we did. But we are not enough. We're not enough. I mean, we're trying, but we're not enough. Because there's another issue here, and I have to challenge the elephant in the room, which is the Irish people as a race and our inherent unwillingness to rock the boat. Inherent unwillingness. There are parents in this country, I hope none of them are in this room, but there are parents in this country who will be going to school meetings this September and learning that their child is going to be taught that there are 7 genders, who will think to themselves, what on earth is this nonsense? But they'll say nothing because the teacher is nice. That is the issue. And therefore, what we have to do is build a movement that talks to those parents and goes, you know what? You are not in a minority. You put your hand up and say, teacher, this is whatever. We will stand and put our hands up beside you. That is what has to happen. Because in this country, there's a fear of being thought to be an oddball. And these are the very instincts that are weaponized against us. They're weaponized against us by this effort to create the notion that there is a majority against us, that the institutions of the state are against us, that every reasonable person thinks these things and only the backward dissent. And yet, why is it then that all their organizations need to be funded by the state and none of ours do? Why is it that Tenny would wither on the vine tomorrow if the taxpayer withdrew funding, but Gript wouldn't? This church wouldn't. Aintu wouldn't. Their organizations are the ones that are hanging on for dear life on taxpayer funding because they cannot survive on their own. Whereas we have a self-sustaining community on our side of the political, in inverted commas, fence. The culture fence is what it really is. And they have to be challenged. Because if they're not challenged, this myth, why are there 17 state-funded LGBT organizations? I'm not anti-LGBT. I nearly said one of my best friends is LGBT. That's true, but it's a cliche. But I'm not anti-LGBT. I just don't know why they need 17 state-funded organizations. The reason they need it is because they can't sustain one independently funded organization to advance these political goals on their own because nobody will fund it. That's the reason. So look, here's the truth. There is no majority in this country for this curriculum. None. But they rely on two things. Apathy, people not caring, and tonight is a bit of a two fingers to them, right? And I hope it's the first of many. And they rely on your fear. They rely on your fear of standing up. They rely on the idea that you might lose your job. They rely on the idea that you might lose friends. They might rely on the idea that somebody across the road might kind of go, oh, he's the religious one. Even if you're not. I've been called super religious all my life. And as I said, I'm not particularly. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Just for expressing conservative views. Because that's the weapon they use. Apathy and a fear of being called a little bit odd. Well, we have to stand up. We have to get over it. We have to ask questions. Because I said at the very beginning, the objective of this curriculum, whether you can accept it, you can dispute it, but it's the truth. The objective of this curriculum is to make all the things that you know to be true in your head and in your heart extinct. In 2 to 3 generations, when they have taught every single one of your kids that there are 25 genders, and the things in your head that you know to be true are gone, that is the objective. To eradicate all diversity of thought and create walking automatons that endorse them. So, at Gript, we're doing what we can within the limits of the press council and our responsibilities to be fair and balanced and blah, 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 to everybody to challenge that. But make no mistake, we're trying our best to ask questions that I think that need to be asked. And I think more people need to join us in doing so. So I'm not going to use all my time. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. Good night. Thank you, John. Thank you, Joanne.